What do you think?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you for sticking around, folks, and for respecting the credits. I think the filmmakers like when you don't cut the credits out and give everybody that worked so hard on the movie to get their flowers. So my name is Alex Piñeres, and I am with Cine and Cine Casual, among other things. We produce the Charlotte Latino Film Festival. In fact, we'll be in this very room on March 27 for our opening night film. So we hope you join us for that as well. But today we'll talk a little bit about this wonderful film. But first, I'd like for Fabíola to introduce herself and tell us a little bit more about her project, Brasicanos in Charlotte. So Fabíola.
Hello, everyone. I'm still shaking with the movie. Oh my gosh, I'm from Brazil. I have an Instagram, Brasicanos in Charlotte. Brasicanos is like the mix Brazil with Americano. My family is a Brasicana family. My husband is from US, and my kids are Brasicanos. In Brazil, I was a journalist for 10 years. Here, I am not anymore because unfortunately, my diploma doesn't work here, but that's another talk. But I'm super shaking with the movie. I was just telling Giovanni, like, oh my gosh, my heart is pumping because it's so home, you know, when you see that movie. And when you heard, because I'm from 79, that means I was born in the dictatorship. And when it ends in 85, I was 6 years old, and my son, one of them, is 6 years old. And I actually don't remember a lot about it, but I do remember my mom and dad and teachers telling me about it, what happened. But yeah, let's talk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you all also gather your thoughts, and I will welcome some questions and some comments as we discuss with Fabíola. I have a few questions for you, and then I would love for folks to also ask some questions. One thing that I will say before we jump in is that at a time when democracy seems fragile in so many places around the world, the arts, and especially films, usually come to the rescue. At least I like to say that. During the pandemics, the arts came to the rescue big time. And one of my favorite writers, Garcia Marquez, in his novel 100 Years of Solitude, talks about the plague of oblivion. And I think this is the type of movies that is the antidote for a plague of oblivion in times when we see threats. And this is sort of a reminder of how ridiculous a dictatorship is. If you're not from Brazil, if you didn't live in a country that experienced dictatorship, you understand struggles of a family. And you understand what something is like, this doesn't make any sense. We didn't see anything in the movie about who was the president, what was going on worldwide, other than journalists from outside of the country telling the story. But at the end of the day, this movie connects so much more with people all over the world. And I'd like to start with that question for you, Fabíola, because what you do with Brasicanos in Charlotte, sort of like sharing Brazilian stories and things that are happening. And this movie took the world by storm. It's become a sort of a window to Brazil by many folks. And first, I'd like to know a little bit about what have you seen the reactions of fellow Brazilians to this film, because Twitter Brazil is a thing, but that's just one microcosm of everything of how this film has become a big deal. So I just want to see your reactions to that.
Seems like the hope is back in Brazil. Like the proud to be Brazilian is pretty back. Because unfortunately, sometimes I feel Brazil are not super proud to be Brazilian because of a lot of things happen. But right now, seems we are one voice. They had many viewers in Brazil, more like than 4 million, like in the first day. And it was like crazy, and everyone, all my friends are talking about, did you see? I'm still here, and it's like, no, I can't wait to see. Thank you so much, guys, for bringing, because I was very excited. But the entire nation, basically, is moving to the cinemas. I have friends who has older moms and dads. It's like, Fabi, my mom and dad never goes to the movie. But now, finally, they want to go. They want to see. They want to see the era where they live. They want to see what they are telling about the dictatorship era. Because, like I told you, I don't remember many times a movie like that or something big telling about the dictatorship in Brazil. And unfortunately, I feel like the younger generation, they don't know what happened. They listen their teachers in the history classes, but that's it. They don't feel, they don't have idea how is to be living in a dictatorship.
Yeah, and I found that, thank you for saying that, because I found that fascinating that, it's easy to talk about the blockbusters having everybody go into the movies. The latest superhero movie or something that is very, superstars. Of course, those movies are always going to do well, but to see this type of film getting not just the accolades, but the numbers and the amount of folks that are seeing them, I found that fascinating in Brazil. Of course, it has detractors. Let's not everybody who loves the movie has detractors. Not so. I wouldn't say detractors on the craftsmanship of the movie, but detractors on the message of the movie. And the question that I have for you, especially because when we were talking about like when you told me that you were born during the dictatorship, and it was like towards the end, I want to ask you about like your memories of middle and high school a little bit, and about how much in your history curriculum and how much in school was it mentioned. And I want to make the parallel to things that we're seeing here in the US, because lately there is a phenomenon of attacking especially history curriculums. So here we see things, for example, in Florida, where there's like a specific things that are being put in place to say what you can or cannot teach in a history. Very, very crazy. Like, you will think about it, just like this movie, like, this doesn't make any sense. We think like, wow, this doesn't make any sense. It's like very uniquely attacking just a history classroom or just this particular book of the library. It's like nitpicking. And I want to know, how much do you learn, or do you not learn at all about the dictatorship during those years of schooling? Like, was it a little bit talked about, or was it a period that was discussed a lot?
In my time, again, I was 6, but I remember growing up 7, 8, 9, 10. I did have a history class, but I also had moral and civic class, and I didn't know why I had those type of class. And lately, I discovered later on, it's like, I had those classes because it was a dictatorship in Brazil. They put those classes to teach the kids what means dictatorship, but in their way, like the right wing. And they were taught in classroom. Today, like the kids are not learning in that way anymore. They talk about openly in history class. they discuss. They don't have more band books, because I remember my mom and dad say, hey, my favorite singers like Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, they needed to leave the country because they were so in big trouble because of their music. You know, that was their way to say what's going on. I remember that a lot of singers went away from Brazil for a while and they come back. I remember learning civical, moral, authoritarianism class we call estudos sociais, and it's like, I didn't know why I was learning that, but later on it's like, oh, that's why, that's the reflection of the dictatorship. But right now, thank you, God, we are not learning that anymore. The history class is open, the kids actually can use their minds, they can think about what happened and make, again, the connection with what's going on today in our world.
So yeah, so that's unique that even after the dictatorship ended, some of those things trickle and stay
For a while.
in classes.
Mhm.
Then we have questions up there. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your comments. I have one quick question and then a more complicated one. The first one is, when Eunice was an elderly woman, was it Fernanda Torres or another actress?
Oh, that's you wanna go? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I got so excited. I have two Brazilian friends here, and it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, Angela and Renata, they are from Brazil. If I'm saying something wrong, please interrupt me. But actually was Fernanda Torres' mom. Yes, because Fernanda Torres, the actress, the main actress, she's her daughter. And that's the beauty, and that's why in Brazil we are so excited about the movie, and we are so excited about the Oscar, because her mom, Fernanda Montenegro, she went for Oscar, I don't know why, yeah, 25 years ago.
Central Station.
Yes, Central Station, you know. She was competing for the Oscar 25 years ago. And now, 25 years later, her daughter is coming with this beautiful movie. Yeah. And I was like, I'm so excited. And the entire Brazil is super excited because it's mom and daughter in the same movie.
Why is it? Thank you very much.
Now your complicated question, I know it's coming.
You keep saying the end of the dictatorship, the end of the dictatorship. Tell us briefly how the Brazilian people ended their dictatorship. We'll take notes.
They literally declared the end of the dictatorship. I but I heard and I read, the first president was still nominated by the militaries, but soon after, like a year later, they put a guy, his name was Fernando Collor, and that is the start of democracy again. But was not the end, like the end in the books, right? But the end of the end is hard to say if you ever end.
Can I help you?
Yes, of course.
It's not, so you know, the Brazilian dictatorship, it was funded and supported by the US.
Of course.
Yeah.
Against the communists, you know, so it ended because there was no more global political support for it. So it's not only the Brazilian people, we are all connected politically. So, and that's what's dangerous about what's going on in the world now.
Mm-hmm.
The growth of the extreme right. And this movie brings us the memory of our possible future.
Yes.
That's why
Yeah,
it's
and that's
so
the
important.
scary part.
So
Yeah.
the more complicated answer to your, I don't think it's a very complicated question, because so for especially in the US, when we learn about the Cold War, and we think of Latin America, we only zoom in on one instant, the 1964 Cuban Missile Crisis. So when we think about the Cold War in Latin America, we only think about, I don't know how long that took, but I can't remember right now, I don't know, the month that it took over the news that this whole continent was in the middle of all of this. But the Cold War in South America took the form of dictatorships. So right before the Brazilian dictatorship, the Paiva, who we see in the movie, Rubens, was part of a more center left leaning party. Wasn't even a communist party. So that's what makes the Brazilian case unique. I think in Chile, we see a little bit more alignment with the communists, and we see a very brutal dictatorship, and we see the coup in Chile took place with the army going in and killing the president. In Brazil, it was just a progressive government that wanted to give the vote to black citizens of Brazil, wanted to incorporate women into all aspects of Brazilian society. So it was just a government that was opening to the world, and of course, anything that was deemed not what the U.S. wanted to happen in South America, it was just, they're going with the Soviets, so we just got to put in a dictatorship. In fact, the CIA had the entire arsenal ready in Brazil to do the same thing that they did in some of the other countries, and they didn't have to do it because there was no opposition, because there wasn't like a communist army or guerrilla ready to fight. So in Brazil, we didn't see that immediate bombing, and then to your point, like how it ended, and what you mentioned, the world started to change, the Soviet influence started to collapse, but here's what was key. The people in the US started to find out what was going on. And the answer was also happening in the South of the US, the civil rights movement. The usage of media to show what was going on, just like people came from the Northeast to the South when they saw that they were lynching, and they were not lynching, I went too back, but they were the freedom riders and all of that stuff that was happening. It was all because they saw it on TV. Once people started to find out what was going on in those countries, the pressure went on. So that's why I always like when I see especially young people put in the emphasis. And nowadays, with social media, like young people will put the emphasis in, if the traditional media will show it, we still find out what goes on in the streets of X whatever. In the streets of Charlotte, if we see ICE raids, we see people documenting and showing what's going on in other countries. And I think that was like key. It was a combination of things, and I got way off topic, but that was a lot of things that came together at the same time. The Soviets having less influence. A lot of South Americans were not interested necessarily in working with the Soviets, but the US just thought, if they're not working with us, they're gonna be against us, so let's install dictatorships. I think we saw another hand over there.
I just wanna add that, I don't know if I can project my voice. Democracy was back in Brazil because people went to the streets. In 1984, there was a huge movement. People went out and demanded democracy now. We wanted to vote. That's when democracy, the people, like in this country, when people start going in the street and see what's going on, then things change. And that was in 1984, officially. That's when the people demanded. The other thing I want to say is that people tend to be nostalgic about the past. And because there were so many social changes in our society and people don't agree. So people are nostalgic for the military dictatorship. They said when the militaries were in power, everything was good. So this movie is important because it tells you the hidden story. This family is working class, high working class. Didn't affect too many. The poverty level was high. People didn't know that what was happening to Brazil. So this movie is important because it sheds a light on what was like to have people disappeared. I had cousins that were students. A lot of students disappeared and were tortured.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
You're
to
welcome.
share a point. Yeah, and unfortunately, like you say, this movie is really, really important for the young people in Brazil because they don't know what happened. They don't know how the military is not the best way to do it, but they think it's cool. And unfortunately, not this president we have right now, Lula, but Bolsonaro, he was trying to bring that back.
Yeah.
And this was not cool at all because unfortunately a lot of young people in Brazil was like, yeah, military is so cool, let's do this, because they didn't have any refer to look back. But I feel like now with the teachers, they can speak out at schools, they can read the books, and they can watch that movie and say, wow, what can we want to do? What do we want to do with our country, with our world, right?
Her point about nostalgia is what's happening in this country today. It's very
People have
bizarre.
short memories.
Yeah.
Yes, very short.
Yeah, Fabiola, you have.
But thank you for let us see this wonderful movie and this story that is so moving and so real. And it's not a history of the past. This is happening in Venezuela. And right now, I'm gonna give you two examples. The son-in-law of the elected president of Venezuela, who was elected in July, and the government didn't let him assume his power, has disappeared in the jails. Nobody knows where he is. Rocio San Miguel, that is a lawyer of civil rights in Venezuela, he's in jail since July, in August, something like that. And in January, she got accidentally in jail a fracture of his shoulder, his neck, clavicle, and she hasn't been able to receive the operation that she need, the surgery that she need. And these people have family, and the ripple effect that this disappearance and this death happened is a big ripple effect for a society. That's why 8 million people have left Venezuela.
Yes, that is a good point because you hit something very, very key. Do you remember the guy that came into the house when they first took her husband, and she asked him, "What do you do?" And he was in the military. He said that he was doing he was like a psychologist. Basically, he was like the psychist of people. And you were so right in that it's not so much about the disappearance because they were in the military and they had control of the courts, and it was a dictatorship. And you can just come on, pick him up, and say you're thrown in jail and make up something that he did wrong, and that's the end of it. Who's gonna challenge you if you have a dictatorship in a country? But the game that is being played is torture to the families, is an ongoing, is little by little silencing and pushing the society to you do not want to question what we do. And in Venezuela is a perfect example of present time.
The revolving doors.
The
Once
revolt.
the family enter, they suffer all the process, and they let them out, so they propagate the message.
Yeah.
Don't go against the government, but this will happen.
And
So it's a revolving door, okay?
and the dictatorship, the regime in Venezuela is also completely different than the regime that was in Brazil. They're in different spectrums of the political agenda, but it just shows the ridiculousness of dictatorship and how fragile democracy can get.
Sadly, it's a narco government.
That-
It's something new, something original, like everything that Venezuela does is original. Narco state.
Yeah, I think I saw. Oh yeah, up here. Yes.
I don't have a question per se. I do have something very similar that I would like to share.
Please.
I was born in a dictatorship, and I was raised into one until I was 13 years old, and I came here. I'm originally from Portugal, from the Azores, and I know exactly what happened. We were under a dictatorship for 50 years, and then we dethroned the dictatorship with the help of the army. It was the army that revolted and threw out the dictatorship. Okay, as an American citizen now, I do have, like we all should have, very big concerns for what is happening to us here now, because we will slowly be quieted as anybody that has a voice and can make their voices heard through the creative minds should rise and help, because we cannot be still. We need to revolt, resist, otherwise we are just going to exist, okay? Because slowly what they are doing is they are creating the formality to start quieting everyone. Okay?
Yeah, for sure. It's a call for action
That
right
is
now.
correct.
A call for action.
We have to rise, we have to, like she said earlier, the lady over there, we have to get out on the streets. We have to revolt, and we cannot just wait for our politicians to help us out.
Resist.
Yeah.
Because
Resist, revolt.
some of them, well, the right, they are afraid because they have to go with the Pope. They have to kiss his ring, okay? I'm not using names because I don't want to be hurt. I am an artist, and I will resist in the forums that I can resist, okay? So if we just stay quiet and wait for the left politicians that we have in the House and in the Senate to help us out, they're not strong enough to do that without our voices. Everywhere we can, be heard and go out in the streets and do it.
Yes, I think that's the key, and that's what with Cine over there, what happened in Brazil. I will tell you one thing, although you did not mention any names, but our current president, Donald Trump, said that he will act like a dictatorship on day one. Those were comments that he made. He went very, he went over the, like nothing major in terms of the news. Like it was just another comment in the middle of a political campaign. But in South America, it was picked up as it was a key thing that was talked about. There was a lot to talk about during the U.S. presidential, any year, whether it's a contested or whether it's a cordial, although we haven't had a cordial political election, the U.S. presidential election is going to take over the news cycle in any other country. And in South America, they talked a lot about those comments because, like, wait a minute, we know exactly what that is like because
We went through it.
we went through it and the U.S. government imposed it, so they wrote the playbook. So a lot of the torture that it was very, very key. What I like about the movie is that it utilizes a lot of metaphors and a lot of little details. So the torture and the usage of the army battalion headquarter place is because, you know, a lot of those folks were trained by U.S. forces in Panama, and then they were sent over to lead the efforts on like how you're going to pick up people, how is the torture going to happen, the step by step. So it's this. That was a reason why, and they kept mentioning Chile in the movie, like, oh, the PAIBA was helping some of the people that were moving to Chile because it was all very, very connected, but very subtle. And the movie was still about the suffering of the family, but not erasing all those, yeah. Exactly, they do smile on pictures. So you see all of those things very well connected, and that's why when that happened here in the U.S., it was picked up and it was mentioned like the acting like day one of a dictatorship is not such a thing. Once you act on day one, it just keeps on growing. It doesn't stop.
Unfortunately, we are not aware enough. The population of this country has never gone through anything like this. They don't know what it is like to be under a dictatorship. And now the tactics that they're actually using towards the undocumented immigrants is just a training, a way of them start doing it to those of us who will speak up, resist in some way, and but we cannot be afraid. We have to resist, otherwise we're just going to exist.
And then we won't.
Pardon?
If we don't resist, we'll continue to exist until one day we won't even do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that call for action?
Yeah.
Community. I feel like community right now. You need to connect with people, connect with your neighbors, connect with your friends. If you go to school, if you go to church, be together, hold hands, good heart, and raise up. Now is the time.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that was a very, thank you for sticking. I know, real quick, I know you mentioned Central Station is also the same director, and there were some beautiful references to the movie. When the mom is reading the letter that her oldest daughter sent from London, please go online and look up Central Station. It's a beautiful movie as well. Thank you. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.